Good afternoon and evening, everyone, and welcome to Stamp Talks presented by the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. Tonight, we have with us Alan Hills, speaking to you about the 2010 Vancouver Olympics, which, if you can believe it, was 15 years ago. Now, Al first started collecting stamps at age 10, which was only a little more than 15 years ago. And like many collectors, he set it aside for his career. But he is back at it, and Al is the current president of the Kitchener-Waterloo Philatelic Society and a member of the Oxford Philatelic Society. He is also a director of the RPSC and my current partner in crime for Stamp Talks and Stamp Panels. Thanks, Al. He collects Canadian varieties, royal family, postal history of Waterloo region, and worldwide COVID stamps and their stories. His latest rabbit hole is collecting Royal Mill pillar post boxes, which I would like to see at another time. We would like to thank Longley Auctions, our sponsor for Stamp Talks and Stamp Panels. Longley Auctions is a public auction firm specializing in selling Canadian material, postal history, worldwide collections, stamps, postcards, and philatelic literature. Be sure to check out longleyauctions.com. And now we will have our land acknowledgement. Oopsies. We will have our land acknowledgement as soon as I share my screen properly.
Like many other organizations in Canada, the Board of Directors of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada has chosen to acknowledge Indigenous peoples in Canada with the following statement. As a step towards reconciliation, the RPSC acknowledges that our national office in Toronto stands on the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Our national office is also covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. Furthermore, we acknowledge that Indigenous peoples did not give up the lands that they had been on for thousands of years that now constitute Canada. We also acknowledge that Europeans did not discover Canada or arrive on an uninhabited land. The RPSC acknowledges that Canada is covered by many treaties and modern lands, resources, and self-government agreements with Indigenous peoples, and that the provisions of many of these arrangements remain unfulfilled. The RPSC further acknowledges that many Indigenous peoples in Canada have not had their rights fully recognized and implemented according to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The RPSC pledges to promote recognition and knowledge of Indigenous peoples in Canada and elsewhere and their cultures through philately. We will also work towards building positive relationships with Indigenous peoples in Canada.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And now, take it away, Al.
Thanks, Lisa.
Okie dokie, we see your screen? And
Great.
now we see it full screen.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lisa, and good evening, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to Stamp Talks. Tonight, it is the Vancouver Olympics with glowing hearts. The Olympics, of course, they took place, as Lisa mentioned, 15 years ago. Can you believe it, that it happened during the month of February and the Paralympics in the month of March of 2010? And it was an amazing time for Canadians to be able to show their pride. As you know, the Olympics, they're the longest running sports event in the world, and it's really the ultimate celebration of human spirit and achievement. The Vancouver Olympics was an opportunity for Canada to showcase its natural bounty of British Columbia and Vancouver, the cultural treasures, and the tradition of athletic excellence. I find that stamps really tell the stories and they capture the history of the moments of individuals, teams, country successes that are immortalized forever. And I find sometimes when I'm looking at my stamp collection and I see some of the history and some of the great moments that have occurred in this country. It really makes me proud to be a Canadian. So tonight, the presentation will discuss some of the many stamps from the games. Of course, there was 82 countries that were represented, and so we'll have a few of those. And we'll talk about the brand that you can see on this slide with the beautiful green, blue, and colors reflecting British Columbia and the coast. Also talk a little bit about the mittens, some of the logos, the emblems, of course, the mascots, the Olympic torch, and also there was some challenges putting on these games. The medals, Canada was fortunate to do very well this at the 2010 Olympics. Some memorable moments that were shared that we watched on our television sets, and also some Olympic firsts. Really, the Vancouver Games, they captured the hearts and minds of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. It was a show of patriotism that hasn't been seen really since the Quebec separation vote in 1995, and really to a lesser extent, Canada won 50 in 2017. In this presentation, the Paralympics, although they are important, they won't be part of this presentation. So tonight, I hope to energize the recent enthusiasm for our great country. And if you happen to be watching the hockey game this afternoon in Boston with Canada and Finland, you know that patriotism and Canada pride is alive and well. Sports. So according to Liz Wong, who at the time was the manager of stamp design and production at Canada Post, this stamp issue really speaks to the passion of the games. Its energy reflects Canada's excitement to be hosting the world-class event of the Olympics. And as these stamps made their way from coast to coast to coast, they spread the Olympic and Paralympic spirit and built anticipation for the arrival of the world's athletes, officials, and sports enthusiasts. So here's a glimpse of the sports, some of the sports that were highlighted in this issue. Of course, there were 19 Olympic sports that were represented at the games. This particular definitive set of stamps, they were released in January of 2009. They celebrate some of the sports like freestyle skiing, snowboarding, bobsledding, curling, ice sledge hockey. It was invented at a rehabilitation center in Stockholm, Sweden in the 1960s. And this sport made its Paralympic debut at Lillehammer in 1994 Winter Games. And now, today, we call sledge hockey para hockey. For snowboard, it really was inspired by skiing, surfing, and skateboarding. And snowboarding became a really exciting addition to the Olympic sports family. The sport made its Olympic debut at the 1998 Olympic Winter Games in Nagano, Japan. For freestyle skiing involves aerial maneuvers performed while skiing downhill. Moguls were added to the official program at the Albertville Olympic Winter Games in 1992, and aerials made their first appearance at the Olympic Winter Games in Lillehammer. For bobsleigh, those sleds have been used for centuries as a mode of transportation. Really, bobsledding was not born until the late 19th century, when the Swiss attached a steering mechanism to a toboggan. In 1924, a four-man bobsled race took place at the first Olympic Winter Games in Chamonix, France. Curling. Though Canada is recognized as the major home for curling today, the game was actually developed in Scotland. It was included in the program of the first Olympic Winter Games, and after a lengthy absence, made its way back into the official Olympic program for the 1998 Nagano Games. In this particular series of stamps, there are some tagging elements on the white section of the stamp with Maple Leafs and Canada Post logos. There is a souvenir sheet as well that has a gold, sorry, has a silver overprint, as the one that's shown here. But there's also a souvenir sheet that has a gold overprint, and not like the one that I'll show you coming up of the souvenir stamps from Vancouver. So one of the things about these stamps is that they really show the movement and the energy of the sport. But what is important to note here that we're a year before the Olympics started, and the VANOC, the Vancouver Olympic Committee, they did not want to give away any of their brand until the next year. So you can see that there is a little bit of green and blue that comes in the on the souvenir sheet that helps to be able to give us a little bit of a clue, a little bit of an awakening of the possibility of the brand that will be shown. One thing that we do have at this stage in the development of the games was the Inukshuk logo and the Paralympic logo that you see on this stamp as well. And this one was also available as a coin stamp set that included the overprint. The four host nations. This is a beautiful logo, and the four host nations did a fantastic job of being able to contribute and provide their land for the Olympics to take place, both in Whistler and in Vancouver. So we're looking at the Squamish, the Musqueam, the Lillooet, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations that hosted the games. They took a prominent place at the opening and closing ceremonies. And throughout the games, the logo could be found everywhere you went. And it really showed the Indigenous culture. And although the Aboriginal governments at the time, they were called the four host nations, they were on the traditional territory where the games were held. They signed a protocol in 2004 in support of the games. But there was opposition to the Olympics from some Indigenous groups and supporters. And that's because they feared that the Olympics would bring unwanted tourism and real estate sales to their territory. Local Indigenous people, as well as Canadian Inuit, initially expressed concerns over their choice of an Inukshuk as the symbol of the games, with some Inuit leaders were such as the former Nunavut Commissioner Peter Urinek stated that the Inukshuk is a culturally important symbol to them. And he said that the Inuit never build Inukshuk with head, arms, legs. The Inukshuks built more recently, maybe 100 years before non-Inuit in Nunavut, with head, legs, and arms. They're not called Inukshuks. These are called Inugot, which means imitation of man. Local Indigenous groups expressed annoyance that the design did not reflect the Coast Salish and Interior Salish native culture from the region that the games were actually being held in, but rather of the Inuit, who are indigenous to the Arctic far from Vancouver. Here we have a slide of an Inukshuk, which is that traditional sculpture that helps to provide guidance for travelers. And the VANOC committee, they were looking at that feel that provide guidance to the visitors and athletes and officials at the games. And that was really their purpose, to be able to have the Inukshuk. The Coast Salish people were the first to discover the breathtaking abundance of the Pacific Northwest. And if you haven't had an opportunity to explore British Columbia and Vancouver Island as part of it, it's definitely a must. Um, the Pacific Northwest, thousands of years ago, was settled in Lower Mainland, which would become British Columbia. And then much later in 1792, it was Captain George Vancouver who put the region on the map, where he wrote about innumerable pleasing landscapes along the shores of the city that would later bear his name. Sports fans and top athletes from around the world had a chance to embrace the Vancouver's rich cultural heritage and discover its natural splendors when they united for this celebration of human achievement. With venues stretching from the cosmopolitan streets of Metro Vancouver to the world-class Whistler Blackcomb ski resort, visitors got a taste of both the urban appeal and the panoramic land and seascapes for which this bustling multicultural metropolis is famous. And this stamp, thanks to Tandem Design, who were a team of Vancouver-based designers hired by Canada Post, they provided this special keepsake two stamp set. So these are the 57 set stamps that were released on January 12th, 2010. So that's just 1 month before the Olympics, uh, garnering some excitement. And that was really the design team's goal, was to create a souvenir for people coming to the games. And they dedicated to focus on the venues with Vancouver and Whistler. And these two stamps, they're one of my favorites. I find that they feature spectacular photographs of Whistler and Vancouver. And this represents the Vancouver 2010 sea to sky theme. And that's the concept that was linking the scenic coastal city with Whistler's really majestic ski slopes. Also, as part of the planning for the Vancouver Games, the Sea to Sky Highway was upgraded to be able to handle the massive amount of traffic that took place. Although there was two athlete villages, a lot of the athletes that were competing in Vancouver and downtown, they actually preferred to be at the Whistler Center and Athletes Village. So you can see on this stamp that we do have the Olympic rings and, of course, the Inukshuk. The thing about these stamps is that they're photos, and according to the designers, they felt that working with these photographs, they can be difficult because they're very rarely meant to be viewed at such a small scale. And I hope that by increasing the size of the stamps, you can get a real sense of the beauty of Vancouver and of Whistler. As for the Vancouver shot, the design team extended the glow that was coming in from the left-hand side of the stamp to be able to make it clear that the photo was taken at sunset. The sea to sky theme, it extended to the souvenir sheet, and which stamps were positioned between a totem pole grounded in the land and an orca whale in the sea. And the stamps are set against a photograph of an Inukshuk located at the peak of Whistler Mountain. And you can also see on the bottom, there's the icons of the 19 sports that were represented at the Vancouver Games. This particular souvenir sheet had the regular sheet and also the gold overprint. And it also came in a stamp coin set. And this particular one also had a 50,000 as the quantity of in the release. So really, when you think about it, that's not that many stamps. It was available as well in a souvenir stamp package. Here's the booklet for this particular set, and it really showcases the area's appeal. And there's also envelope seals that work in some of the other defining aspects of British Columbia. A totem and a Inukshuk speak to the region's rich indigenous history and culture, and there's a Komodo bear, an orca whale, and an eagle as stamp seals, which are the creatures of the land, water, sea, and sky that really evoke Vancouver's spectacular wildlife scene and its varied natural settings. I like the fact that in the back of this booklet, we have the mittens. And the red mittens, they were, if there's many things that captured the Canadian feel of the 2010 games in Vancouver, uh, the red mittens, they really emblazoned um, the maple leaf with their woolen hand coverings. And these were released by the Hudson Bay Company. They were sold for $10 a pair. And it turned out that this was an accidental popular souvenir at the 2010 games. And they were distributed by Hudson Bay. More than 3.5 million pairs were sold, making it a must-have item at the Vancouver Olympics. And I keep these for days like we've had over the course of the weekend because they have a nice lining on the inside, and they really were have been great to be able to enjoy outdoor winter activities, and that's what they were for. So it had the maple leaf on the inside with the Olympic rings on the outside, and this really became that iconic part of the games. Hudson Bay, they actually needed to be initially they needed to be convinced that to make the mittens part of their Olympic apparel. Uh, uh, HBC, they actually didn't like the idea because there was no market proof that mittens would sell. And the idea for the mittens, which I mentioned, featured the white maple leaf and the sewn into the palm and the Olympic rings on the back. It really came from an entry in the contest to make a logo for the 2010 games. So you can imagine that the mittens could have been the actual logo. And after making their debut during the Olympic torch relay, the mittens quickly became bestsellers and received a publicity boost from Oprah Winfrey. And she handed out pairs of mittens to ecstatic members of her studio audience. That became one of the huge retail successes, and a big part of the sales of those mittens, they went to the Own the Podium program. On the Podium started in 2005 with the goal to be able to just that, get more athletes to the podium, and they've done a great job of being able to have greater success at the Olympic Games since 2010. And the sales of these mittens, the 3.5 million pairs, garnered $15 million for Canadian Olympic sport. By day 4 of the Olympics, these mittens were sold out from coast to coast to coast. This is one of the first day covers that was released by Canada Post, and uh, on January the 12th, and a month before the Olympics, featuring the orca. And you can really see the movement out of the water and the grandeur of the the animals and especially the orca whale, which is so iconic of British Columbia. And here it is uh, emerging from the water, just as the athletes have emerged out into their events to be able to bring home glory to their countries. I like this first day cover as well. Once again, released by Canada Post. And this celebrates the nature. And in this particular case, look at this bald eagle with its wings stretched from the Inukshuk right to the Vancouver 2010 logo that really helped to be able to bring that enthusiasm and understanding that British Columbia has so many natural resources that need to be shared. And this is why these two stamps became really the main souvenir for people to be able to enjoy and remember the games. When we look at the brand, this happens to be a shot of the express screening lane, and you can see that the cultural uh, iconic blue, green, and the trees and nature, and it has a lot going on. There's the ski hills at Whistler. There's the different types of trees. There's the downtown Vancouver, and this brand was so successful because it was seen everywhere, whether it was on the boards of the ice hockey games, whether it was on banners on the streets, whether it was in places like the venues, you could not escape it. And the thing was about this brand was that you didn't want to escape it. It said more about, give me more about Vancouver and show me more about British Columbia, show me more about this world that is so beautiful. And so I wanted to be able to show that it exists in so many different areas, such as if you take a look at this, we'll call this an Olympia. That was one of the sponsors of the Olympics. But here on this Zamboni, you have the volunteer who is dressed in their amazing Vancouver brand colors. There's the Inukshuk logo and the Olympic rings, the sea to sky brand, along with the mascots. And this was found everywhere. One of the things that occurred though with the Zamboni, this particular company, these were electric, and they chose electric because, as much as possible, the Vancouver Olympics, they tried to be as green thinking as possible. And unfortunately, at the Richmond Oval, some of the events were delayed because they had some mechanical issues and they had to bring in the Zamboni brand, but they had them wrapped with the logos, and they just fit right in, and continued to be able to keep the ice nice and fluid for the athletes. As far as the Olympic torch relay, the Olympic torch was also another iconic representation of the games, and it's really the transfer of the as you know, the transfer of the torch relay comes from ancient Greece, where the first Olympics were held thousands of years ago, and to the stadium of the city hosting the current Olympic Games. And the flame always arrives just in time for the opening ceremony. So for the Vancouver 2010 games, the flame was lit in Olympia on October 22nd, 2009, and then it traveled from Greece over the North Pole to Canada's high Arctic and on to the West Coast in Vancouver. The relay started its long Canada journey from the British Columbia capital of Victoria. In Canada, the torch relay traveled approximately 45,000 kilometers over 106 days, making it the longest relay route within one country in Olympic history. The Olympic torch was carried by approximately 12,000 Canadians and reached over 1,000 communities. So, in addition to many torchbearers, they also were able to engage many celebrity torch bearers, and they included people like at the time, former governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, sports people like Steve Nash, musicians, Michael Bublé, Bob Costa, Shania Twain, hockey greats like Wayne Gretzky and Sidney Crosby, and the captains of the Vancouver Canucks team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals in 1994, and that was Trevor Linden. The
Al,
emblems.
to
Yes,
backtrack a little bit,
yes.
do you know if there was a post office at the Olympic Village?
Yes, there was. There was a post office in Whistler at the Whistler Sliding Center, and of course downtown Vancouver. The emblems here. This is an interesting process that Canada Post put together. These are the coil stamps, and you can see on the right that's the roll of 100. So these two permanent domestic rate stamps. One features the Vancouver Winter Games emblem, and then there's the contemporary interpretation of the Inukshuk, and the other features the Paralympic Winter Games. And one interesting point to note was that this was the first time that Canada Post ever released stamps on coil rolls that were alternating emblems or alternating different stamps. You probably are aware that years later and recently they've had like the flower issues that come out. They'll have two stamps on a coil, but this is where it all started at the Olympics. Here's the first day cover of the two emblems with the Canada Post cancellation showing the Inukshuk along with the Paralympics logo. The brand, the sea to sky colors are reflected here, and you can see the motion that it creates, and it has that feel of movement and passion for the games, and also passion for the country, from coast to coast to coast, by rail, by sea, and also with athletes that are embedded into the description here. One of the things that occurred in British Columbia was that Canada Post actually released cancels for 30 British Columbia cities and 2 cancels for Yukon. This cancel here is from Whitehorse, Yukon. So if a city had something to do with the games, anything to do with the games, they were given a postmark. And a series of cancels of all 26 sports were available at the main Canada Post Office in downtown Vancouver throughout the games. So this is a potential collecting activity if you're at a show and or looking at your favorite stamp dealer like Longley Auctions, and you may find these very specific and hard to find cancels. There were some challenges at the games, and you'll probably be familiar with the stories that go along with the opening ceremonies and and leading up to the games. This was, of course, there's always going to be situations where people are concerned about, will this make money? Will this be worthwhile for the country? Will this be worthwhile for British Columbia and the city of Vancouver? Will we go into deep debt? And so that was a challenge, but they also were able to prove everybody wrong because the games actually made a small profit. Some of the challenges, though, were the lack of bilingualism at the opening ceremonies. The program was of the opening ceremonies was really criticized for perceived lack of appropriate representation of French-speaking Canadians in spite of Canada's status as a bilingual country. There was many objections that were raised about the lack of bilingualism throughout the event, and we know that French is alongside English as the International Olympic Committee's official language. Quebec Premier at the time, Jean Charest, said that the ceremony failed to respect and reflect the Francophone community in Canada. Another challenge that existed was the H1N1, the swine flu that around 2008, 2009, it was a global pandemic. And although the symptoms were not as potentially deadly as the ones through COVID, but it certainly was a major concern of having H1N1 spread throughout the spectators, the staff, and the athletes during the games. So organizers, they stockpiled vaccines and placed a high priority on vaccinating all the volunteers. So while each country was responsible for the vaccination of its own athletic delegation, Vancouver health officials and International Olympic Committee, they strongly recommended that all athletes, spectators, and other visitors be vaccinated. Some Olympic committees, from countries, they actually required their delegations to be vaccinated against H1N1 before arrival. And in light of all these concerns, the local British Columbia health officials vaccinated participants and spectators free of charge for the duration of the games. There was a security threat at the opening ceremonies. A mentally ill man from British Columbia was able to use a homemade all-access pass at the opening ceremonies and was able to clear several layers of security at BC Place Stadium to get close to then U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, who authorities said that this man had an infatuation with. However, before he could reach Biden, he was stopped by two plainclothes Mounties who escorted him away. And the man did not face any charges. He was just placed in a facility. And the RCMP said that it did not implement any change in security at the Olympics following this breach. One thing that, in terms of security, it was mainly run by the United States. The headquarters was in Seattle, Washington, where they were able to have many cameras set up. And at every single event, going into the event, passing through security, there would always be plainclothes RCMP that would be taking photos every 2 seconds of the people coming into the venues so that they would be able to track that and to be able to have a record if needed. Fortunately, there weren't any major issues that other than the Joe Biden threat that occurred. The women's ski jumping, that was voted on in 2006 by the International Olympic Committee not to include women's ski jumping in the 10 games on the grounds that the sport wasn't developed enough and did not meet the basic criteria for inclusion. There was men's ski jumping. The members of the Canadian women's ski jumping team, they filed a grievance with the Canadian Human Rights Board citing gender discrimination. Unfortunately, that was disregarded because they felt that the charter did not apply to international Olympic events. The cauldron, you may remember this from the opening ceremonies, that the ceremony was stalled while organizers tried to recover from mechanical problems that prevented the fourth pillar of the cauldron in the photo that you see. The fourth pillar did not rise as it was supposed to, and Katrina LeMay-Doan was supposed to light that fourth column, and it was not planned, of course, and it was something that people may not even have noticed at home on television of what was happening. It was only really the people that attended the opening ceremonies that saw that something was wrong. But it was fixed, and for the closing ceremonies, they actually made a joke out of it. They had an engineer mime that climbed out of the stage as if he had just fixed it and pretended to pull it up. So it was great that they were able to turn something that was not so good into a humorous story. And Katrina LeMay-Doan, who was supposed to have lit the fourth pillar, she actually came out in the closing ceremonies and finally got the chance to be able to light the cauldron. As far as the temperature for the games, this was a games that at sea level, and on the first day, the temperature was 7 degrees Celsius, and it was melting all the snow on Cypress Mountain. And so precipitation really played a negative role at the opening ceremonies. Wayne Gretzky was the torchbearer that was responsible for lighting the outside cauldron, leaving the BC Place, and he actually had to be driven in a pickup truck because of the heavy rain all the way to Cole Harbor, where the second cauldron was, where he was able to light it. And later in the weekend, the second cauldron at Cole Harbor, it had to be fenced off because it posed a safety threat to visitors who were climbing all over the cauldron. So that was something that they didn't expect. The temperatures were very warm during the opening weekend of the games. Some of the events had to be rescheduled, and they trucked the VANOC committee. They trucked in snow from Whistler to be able to ensure that Cypress Mountain would have enough snow for the moguls and the ski cross. The luge track speed. This is the most tragic situation that you could possibly have at an Olympic Games or anywhere. Shown in this stamp here is from Georgia. It's Nodar Gumartalashvili, and at just 22 years old, and hours before the opening ceremony, Nodar was killed during a training run, and he was thrown from his sled, and he struck a steel pillar at high speed near the end of the course. The International Luge Federation called an emergency meeting after the accident, and all other training runs were canceled for the day. The Vancouver Organizing Committee was criticized heavily after members of the media assumed that VANOC was the governing body that conducted only a 12-hour investigation into the luger's death. And they put the blame on the luger. But in fact, it was the International Luge Federation which conducted the investigation afterwards, and they stated that there would be a report that would be issued at the end of March 2010. So this was taking place at the Whistler Sliding Center, and a year before the Olympic Games, the luge run was experiencing some of the fastest speeds in luge history, and it was the site of several non-fatal accidents during training runs leading up to the start of the games. So for more than a year prior to the Olympics, luge competitors had complained that the track was too fast and the turns were too dangerous. Athletes had nicknamed the turn 13 of 16 turns the 50-50 turn, which said that their chances for getting through it without crashing were just that 50-50. Nodar was killed on turn 16. It was the last turn on the course. As a result, the height of the wall that Nodar surmounted was increased. There was added wooden panels and padding, and officials also ordered changes to the layout of the final turn. They made it slower and safer, and they moved the men's and the women's luge start further down the track. Nodar's teammate did not race. He was on the official start list for the first run, but withdrew, telling other racers he could not go on, understandably. He flew back to Georgia to mourn the loss of his teammate. So this stamp really reflects Nodar. You can see on the left-hand corner the dove of peace, and it was an Olympic stamp, but it was released in his memory on October the 15th, 2010. Here's a couple of the stamps that were released, and every country was able to put together Olympic stamps, which really reflected and evoked the passion of the games and the movement of the sport and the speed of the sport and the grace of the sport. Here are the French stamps with figure skating and alpine skiing. Slovenia, they were a little bit more simplistic, and you can see that they don't show any of the Olympic logos or emblems, just the Vancouver 2010 description and on the ski flags and on the hockey stick. And along with that, the United States, they put out their 44-cent stamp just before the games, and they have a snowboarder up in the air, making its run down the slopes, and it also helped to be able to generate that energy of the games and the enjoyment of the games. A lot of people, they seem to like the Winter Olympics more than the Summer Olympics, just for the fact that there is a speed factor in many of the sports, along with the grace. So these are just a few of the 82 country stamps that were released. Bulgaria on they put out their stamp on February 2010, and this is a stamp that is it's actually a souvenir sheet, and with the two stamps, the snowboarder and the luge, and with the colors of the Olympic rings that are in motion going downhill, which are really helping to evoke that the spirit of the actual sports themselves. This particular cover has a lot going on, and but the first day issue cover is postmark is in uh, the bottom of the cover in the middle, right by the tax due box. Our mascots. Our mascots for the 2010 Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games were designed by Vicky Wong and Michael Murphy of Meomi Design, and they were introduced in 2007. and these were inspired by First Nations creatures. So the mascots included on the right, there was Miga, who is a mythical sea bear, part orca and part Kermode bear. Quachi, who is the most visible mascot, was actually a Sasquatch who wears winter boots and blue earmuffs all the time. Sumi, as in the next shot, I'll show you, is an animal guardian spirit who wears the hat of an orca whale, flies with the wings of the mighty thunderbird, and runs on the strong, furry legs of a black bear. And then, and these are the first day covers, and you can see the cancel was another mascot sidekick named Muck Muck. So he was hard to find, wasn't very visible throughout the games, but he became a little bit of a cult sensation at the games. He was a surprise success for Vanok, and they never intended to be able to have a fourth mascot. But Muck Muck is a Vancouver Island marmot, and the local artists Vicky Wong and Michael Murphy that they also created the Octonauts children's books and animated series. They were initially hired to create 3 mascots for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, but the pair suggested adding a fourth character as a sidekick. And Muck Muck became really popular. He became that, as I mentioned, that cult favorite. Everybody loved Muck Muck, and Vanok actually they decided that, well, we have to create a stuffy of this marmot. And it was soon available at Hudson Bay, and it sold out across the country. And that cartoon marmot, and not to mention the red mittens, became a cash cow for Vanok. With the merchandise, they sold over $600 million, making it a really important part of funding of the games. Here's the souvenir sheet. You don't see Muck Muck here. The cancellations are showing 3 sports, and with Miga and Sumi in the middle there with the curling representing the Paralympics, and Quachi in goal. Quachi is also featured, and Miga and Sumi were featured on booklet stamps. The souvenir sheet also had a bronze overprint, and you could find the 3 overprints for the souvenir stamps, the sporting stamps, and the emblems and mascot stamps in this limited edition souvenir package. These stamps have extra tagging elements throughout the white portions of the stamps. And you can see there's the Canada Post permanent logo throughout the stamp. As far as Muck Muck was concerned, the photo here is a paper mache Muck Muck that somebody created. You can see the fans are enjoying their time. They've got their red mittens on. And Hungary released a stamp, and they're the only ones that actually released a stamp that had Muck Muck on it. And that was their version of being able to have Muck Muck as a skier. He was found all over the place. He was found on pins, on various souvenirs that had Muck Muck driving Zambonis, and was hidden in various areas. And because he's kind of like that elusive Vancouver Island marmot. In 1981, Canada Post released their part of their series of endangered wildlife. And because the Vancouver Island marmot, it's one of the few mammals unique to Canada, and it lives only on Vancouver Island. This animal began to evolve 100,000 years ago when low sea levels allowed its ancestors to cross from the mainland to the island. And already few in numbers, disturbed in the environment and hunted by humans and other predators, the marmot population is on the decline. And at present, there's only 50 to 100 that are known to survive. The marmot prefers alpine and subalpine areas with steep slopes and rocky debris and open meadows. It eats leaves, flowers, fruits, and hibernates for approximately 8 months of the year. And that's one of the reasons why he was, as a sidekick, he wasn't seen very often. And when he was seen, it became a real thrill for all the visitors to the games. And this particular stamp, it was a painting by Michael Dumas, and it's depicting the marmot emerging from its burrow in a grassy clearing in the mountainous interior of Vancouver Island. These stamps also concluded a series of endangered wildlife stamps that featured the peregrine falcon, the soft-shelled turtle, and the eastern cougar, the prairie chicken, and the Atlantic whitefish. However, muckmuck was found on some postmarks, and so on the souvenir first day covers, there's muckmuck on the left facing us, and on the right he's with the fan number one floaty, and marching along and enjoying the games. So you can see even with these cartoon type illustrations, they really show the movement of the games, and that was really spoke to the theme of the games. Olympic medals, moving on here. So we all remember this on Sunday, February the 14th, which was officially day 3, but it was really day 2 of the games, that Alexandre Bilodeau won the first gold medal on Canadian soil, and for his event, the Moguls. And there he is with the biting into the gold medal. And these medals were very special. So Canada Post, they decided to release this. They had this stamp prepared in advance, and they were concerned about being able to get them sent out from Ottawa to the games in time for when that first gold medal would occur. On the first day of competition, Jennifer Heil, who was the reigning world champion in freestyle aerials, she had a great games, but unfortunately, and she was the 6-time world champion, she unfortunately won the silver. And that was one of those times that the organizers of the games, they were really counting on Jennifer to be able to win that gold medal. But when Alex Bilodeau won in moguls, the excitement was palpable, and Canada Post released this stamp. Now, this stamp was supposed to be released on its date of issue is officially February the 14th, but that was the Sunday, and it came out on Monday, the 15th. However, there were some of the stamps that had arrived at a couple of the downtown Vancouver postal outlets. So there was a few lucky collectors that were able to get cancels for February the 14th, where everyone else would have their cancels on February the 15th. In terms of the medals, this was as I mentioned, the first time that Canada won a gold medal on home soil. They failed to do that in 1976 and 1988, although the women's curling in 1988, the women actually won the gold, but it was just a demonstration sport at the time. So it was one of the medals that helped Canada to be able to actually win the Olympics with the most gold medals in the competition with 14. and they were the first host nation to win that many since Norway in 1952. Canada broke the record for the most gold medals won at a single Winter Olympics, which is 14. And that record had been set by the Soviet Union in 1976 and Norway in 2002. The United States in these games, though, they won the most medals, and that was marking the second time that they ever did that at the Winter Olympics. And so they broke their record for the most medals won at the Winter Games, which was 37, which was a record that was held by Germany from the games in 2002 at 36 medals. Athletes from Slovakia and Belarus, they won their first Winter Olympic gold medals at the Vancouver Games. Here's how the Australians celebrated their gold medal Olympic winners, and Tora Bright for half pipe and Lydia Lasilla for freestyle in the aerials. These stamps were released on February the 25th, and there was also souvenir sheets that went along with it, and they were the um, uh, only two gold medal winners. And this is an example of the souvenir sheet. And you can see that they've incorporated the blues and the animals, the mountains, white, snow-capped in the background. And it was a great tribute to these athletes. On the right-hand side, the Czech Republic, they celebrated Martina Sabalakova, and she won her gold medal for the Czech Republic. And the Czechs, they really had their hopes set on Martina winning a gold medal. They also had cross-country skiing and freestyle skiing that placed well. As far as ice hockey, the Czech Republic, they didn't really meet their expectations. The Czechs went out in the quarterfinals of the men's hockey. On the left, Russia, and I'm showing these stamps because you can see that they don't quite show the design of the indigenous styled medals because they actually didn't get permission to be able to use them. So they created their own version with the Inukshuk, with Russia celebrating their gold medal. And in this particular Olympics, Russia, they won 14 medals, but only 2 of them were gold. It was their worst showing ever at an Olympic Winter Games. They feel that part of that reason was because before the Russian athletes went to the games, they were provided with an incentive and a financial incentive and gifts. So for the athletes, many of them felt that they had already won. So they felt that, according to the team psychologists, that they felt that they really psyched themselves out and they didn't perform as well as they could have. Jaromír Jágr was the a hockey player playing for the Czechs, and he was the flag bearer at the opening ceremonies, and Martina Sabalakova was the flag bearer at the closing ceremonies for the Czech Republic. Canada also released the congratulations stamps, and these came out in February 22nd, 2010. These are die-cut singles from the self-adhesive booklet, and they feature Chandra Crawford. So the backgrounds of these stamps feature 4 events: the men's 4-man bobsled, the women's cross-country sprint, the men's short track, relay speed skating, and the Canadian cross-country skier Chandra Crawford accepting her gold medal at the Torino 2006 Winter Games in Italy. And that was one for the cross-country sprint. So you can see that here there isn't any identification of the brand because these athletes, all the images were taken from the Torino games. However, they do show the Vancouver logo, the Inukshuk. This also had the souvenir sheet, and you can see the Canada Post rendition of their medal as part of their postmark. Joni Rochette. So one of the other moments of the games that was very powerful, and I have all these images of Joni because it's really a story of trauma and triumph that and really the staggering grief and this incredible grace of Joanie Rochette. Just a day after Joannie's mother, Teresa, arrived in Vancouver to cheer on her daughter, Teresa suffered a massive heart attack and died just 2 days before the figure skating short program. And Joanie's mother had been with Joanie throughout her figure skating career, helped to propel her to 6 national figure skating titles. Joanie scored well in the short program, and that set her up for her performance to receive the bronze medal on February 23rd. Fans from all over the country and all around the world, they cheered on to help give Joanie the support and the strength to continue despite her grief. And it really was one of those truly Olympic moments that Joanie captured the hearts of all Canadians. Joanie ultimately retired from figure skating, and she studied medicine at McGill University, realizing another goal to become a doctor after graduating in 2020. So you know what? As soon as she graduated, she applied to work in a long-term care facility. And 2020, just at the height and the beginnings of the global pandemic. So today, Joanie continues to be a consultant with the Canadian Olympic Association and with Skate Canada. On February 25th, the women won gold in ice hockey, defeating the United States 2-0. You can see behind in the photo here, you can see behind the red and white of the Canadian fans and the excitement of the Canadian women's team. So after a few minutes after winning their gold, I'm not sure how this happened, but at Canada Hockey Place, the hockey players, they came back onto the ice with champagne and beer, and they started to smoke cigars. So really, because of their excitement, unbeknownst to them, they were being photographed. And then their celebration was ultimately criticized by the U.S. media, who they had just beat 2-0, Marie-Philippe Poulin scoring the winning goal. And they felt that smoking and drinking in public was unbecoming of Olympic athletes. Canada issued an apology, and although other members of the Olympic Committee dismissed their concerns over the event. The Canadian captain at the time was Hayley Wickenheiser, and she said that there was a double standard that was being applied, since a male athlete would not have been judged so harshly, as was the case, if you remember, John Montgomery, who had that another iconic video of him carrying those jugs of beer at the Whistler Sliding Center after he won the gold medal in skeleton. Also, another iconic moment and photograph that was taken at the Pacific Coliseum after Charles Hamelin had won the double gold in the 500 and the 5,000 sprint with his brother, and his girlfriend at the time, Marie Saint-Gelais, came running down from the stands and jumped onto the boards and gave him a big kiss. And that was captured and certainly promoted around the world. But you can see in the background, there was the speed skating rink and the brand colors that were everywhere. Couple other stamps, which are not my favorites, but you can see that Estonia, they also tried to be able to capture that movement and spirit of the games. and Macedonia that they had this really busy set of stamps with the Vancouver logo in the middle, and this is reflecting the ski jumping and hockey. I wanted to show this photo just because it's Kevin Martin and his team that won the gold in curling, and behind you can see that the rings of the curling ice were in the colors of the games, and then the golden goal. So this is Sidney Crosby, the 3-2 win over the United States. And as it turned out, the Canadian men, they won the gold. The United States won the silver, and Finland won the bronze in both the women and the men's. The photographer, Paul Chasson, said that well, you see it happen, but you really don't know what the picture is going to be. And he was in the corner taking photos, mainly focusing on the goal, and was able to capture Sidney Crosby after he had just scored this goal in overtime. Sidney said, "There's high expectations. I've been like that for a long time. And I think you've kind of grown up with those expectations, and they've kind of stayed, which is great. That's the way it is. And I don't think we'd have it any other way." And here we have Sidney Crosby today playing for Team Canada in the Four Nations Cup, still doing the best he can. This is a photo of the sledge, which is now para ice hockey. The women's team and the men's team got together for a great photo. In terms of some firsts, just winding up here, that the motto "with glowing hearts" came from our national anthem. The first time there's ever been a theme, a motto that came from an anthem, a national anthem. Our first gold medal on home soil, and we had the most gold medals at 14. The Canada-US gold medal hockey game had the most viewers worldwide ever in Winter Olympic history. And the first Olympic hockey tournament was played on an NHL-sized rink. USA won the most medals at a Winter Olympics. There was the most global television coverage. The era and age of social media was just really in its infancy, but certainly the television coverage was huge. And the Vancouver opening and closing ceremonies, it was the first time ever that an opening and closing ceremonies were held for Winter Olympics indoors. Vancouver had their Olympics take place at sea level for the Vancouver portion. That's the first time ever. And Vancouver was also the largest city and the warmest temperature-wise to host the Winter Games. The oldest woman at the Winter Games was Annette Norberg, and she was 43 years old, 106 days, and she won the gold medal in curling. I know there's a lot to unpack here with the Olympics, and I just want to thank you for your attention, and that's my presentation on the Vancouver Winter Olympics. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. We do have a question that kind of got bypassed, and I'm coming back to now. You mentioned some of the challenges, including the security issues and the security RCMP taking photos every 2 seconds. Do you know what happened to those photos?
The photos were supposed to be deleted at the end of the games, and I'm not sure whether that actually happened or not.
Supposed to. Let's hope they were.
Yes.
An additional question. What do you think of the 2003 booklet of 30 stamps that Canada Post issued when Vancouver was selected as the host city? It had an unusual format of 3 conjoined booklets of 10. It is often described as an overprint, but wasn't it actually a new printing?
That issue, I wanted to include it in the presentation, but it just felt that it didn't have the well, of course, it didn't have any of the thematics of the Olympics, the brand or the Inukshuk, because that was still in the planning stages. But I think that my personal opinion was that the stamps they really didn't meet the energy and emotion that the stamps from 2008 on did.
Agreed. All right, I don't think we have any more questions. Maybe someone will ask in later. But thank you, Al, for taking us down through such a lovely and patriotic memory lane. And thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you once again to Longley Auctions. Visit longleyauctions.com and you can look for these interesting and beautiful pieces of recent 15 years ago, recent Canadian history, and relive the glory. Please do join us next month for our next Stamp Talk. Arnie Jansen will be speaking about a variety of varieties, part 3. He always has interesting things to show us, so be sure to join us next month. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.